Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. I got Andy with me tonight, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Ultimate Journey. Andy, I'm glad you're here tonight. I'm hoping you're ready for this long-awaited conversation.
You know it. It's been a while. The viewers don't know how many times we have been cursed to connect on this one, but we're here now, and we're back to the Marvel side of things, so it's gonna be fun.
Yes. Yes, today we're going to be taking a look at a true turning point in the Ultimate Universe storyline because things started to, I guess you could say, steer off in a very unorthodox direction compared to the Marvel 616 universe. But tonight we're going to be taking a look at a trilogy of miniseries that are actually connected, but really start us off on a very, very different direction. This is basically the point after Ultimatum, which was pretty much like the midpoint, the intermission of the whole Ultimate Universe, as you will. Now was the point in time when all the creators that were behind the Ultimate Universe decided to take some very different journeys and took different risks as to how this universe was going to unfold. So we're going to be taking a look at three stories, and I'm just going to hold up the first issue of the first of the four miniseries. We're going to be taking a look at what is known as the Ultimate Universe Doomsday trilogy, and we're going to be looking at Ultimate Enemy,
Was it?
Ultimate Mystery, and
And
Ultimate Doom. And these three miniseries are written by the man who pretty much started the Ultimate Universe, Brian Michael Bendis. But the one thing that I actually didn't know when I first read this, see, this is the most important thing about getting into comics and getting back into comics when you really start to take a look at some of the artists and the writers that are there and you start developing new likes and new tastes. I knew the artist Rafa Sandoval from a lot of stuff that I'm currently reading. As a matter of fact, one of his big books that Rafa Sandoval is contributing to right now is in the DC All In initiative. He's with Jason Aaron doing Absolute Superman, which is really a good book to most. I mean, I enjoyed the very first story arc, but I had no idea that he drew these books. And now that I actually know it's actually him doing this, it really is good artwork. It's very,
yeah,
very bright. That's what I like about it. It's very bright, very dimensional. It's got a lot of
yeah.
good perspective in it. I really, really enjoyed looking at this book and reading it on the same note. I didn't really remember much of the story as a whole. I mean, I knew what it was, and I knew, especially for the Ultimate Journey, what this was going to be. But after reading uh, these three quadrilogies, I did very enjoy enjoy them. I have a couple of nitpicks here and there, but I very much did enjoy these stories as a whole.
Yeah, on the whole, I think I agree with you. A couple thoughts. While we're on the topic of the art, I do think it looks great, very vibrant, a lot of color. I think a lot of the times when you and I are talking about a book that really catches our attention from an art perspective, it tends to be when it's got a cinematic quality to the kinetic nature of the action. So there's a lot of really great, movement in this comic and a lot of really fantastic splash pages of big action moments that are really cool. So it's really well done on that front. So it's a good thing to say that. I also would say, I mean, I definitely enjoyed it. Probably have a couple of nitpicks with it as well. I think some of that is we we didn't read Ultimatum for the channel, right?
No, we did not.
Yeah, so a lot of this is like fallout from Ultimatum. So this is one of those stories that's like if you weren't doing what we're doing, this is one of those find out what happens next kind of reads, right? So it feels like there's a little bit that's happening just outside the frame, but that's really just because of how much continuity mattered to this story. But all of that is to say, I think this is a fun read in and of itself. So most of my nitpicks come down to that. So if you can just kind of put that part of it aside, I think it's a pretty entertaining story in and of itself.
Right. I mean, I will definitely say that one of the things that I really do like about this, because I think one of the few things that I did say, especially when we did our last Ultimate Journey to Secret Wars, was the fact that the Ultimate Requiem of Spider-Man was the very first Ultimate Spider-Man story that I read. I didn't really read anything prior to that, while saying that Brian Michael Bendis pretty much started everything with Ultimate Spider-Man. But one of the few things that I really did see, particularly in this book, is I love the fact that Peter's got a little circle of friends that are all metahumans. I love the fact that he's got
Mhm.
this little group of friends that include Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, Shadow Cat, Mary Jane is part of it too. I mean, I just love the fact that he has this cute little group of friends, as
Yeah.
opposed to in the 616 universe where friends are usually kind of hard to come by for Peter.
Yeah, it's a really nice thing. It's funny to talk about it, being a little bit more familiar with Ultimate Spider-Man. It feels more natural to me, but you're right. It's a point of contrast with the 616 universe. It's really fun. Also, not for nothing, I particularly enjoy getting to see a little bit more of Bobby in these stories. He's one of my favorite kind of bright spots for that reason.
Yeah, and I also
Um,
think it's really cute about the fact that, like, in this whole clique, Aunt May is everybody's Aunt May. Like, everybody looks at her as a maternal figure. And I think that that is just very, very cute.
There's a panel in the first arc where I think it was Peter calls Aunt May to warn her about some danger that is coming. And in that scene, both Mary Jane and Bobby say, Aunt May. Like what it's I just both referring to her in that way. It's just there's something very heartwarming about it.
Mhm.
And I clocked it immediately
Yeah,
that they're both using that phrasing.
right. So the story of Ultimate Enemy starts off with my first. I'm not going to say that it's a nitpick of mine, but to me, it's the part of the story because this is a plot point of the story that really carries all the way through all three of these stories in the Ultimate Doomsday trilogy. And it's Spider Woman. The
Mhm.
fact that we have a take, and I will probably say a better take on the concept of a clone of Spider-Man, because when it comes to the world of maximum clonage, Marvel really botched that one. Like, they really didn't really hit the mark as many people liked it. It was known as like one of the most divisive stories that the world of Spider-Man had until, of course, the dreaded One More Day came along.
Mhm.
But the whole Spider Woman story or Spider Girl story, I personally did not understand why it was here. I
Mhm.
mean, I understood what Jessica's motives were. She was just trying to figure out where she belonged in this world. I will say I did enjoy the point where she and Peter did meet and they had a really weird banter. I thought that was very comical, but that was probably one of the two. It was I really think it was only two things I really didn't care about when it came to this story. So I was really, really curious to see your thoughts on Spider Woman's story in these three stories.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, it's interesting. I said I was really not going to nitpick too much other than that, but I think I agree with you that I respect the fact that her role kind of ends up being a sort of frame story, but I got a little frustrated feeling like she was a little too disconnected, and when the action pulled towards her, we were getting away from. And maybe my framing here is that we're reading this for a very particular reason on our journey to Secret Wars, right? And I see what she's doing, and I think to myself, this doesn't have nearly as much to do with why we're reading Doomsday as what everybody else is up to every time she splits off solo. But yeah, I guess I largely agree with you on that with her usage there. I think It's funny, we talk about how great it is seeing that kind of close-knit circle of friends that Peter has been able to develop. And so that's a pretty strong counterpoint, that what we enjoy is getting to see a cast of characters together solving what is essentially a mystery. Actually, that's even the title of the second arc together. And so she kind of pulls away from that thesis that we're following. So,
Exactly. I
I
mean,
wouldn't say it's a mark on the book or anything, but
no,
I'm a
not at
little
all.
less interested. That's
I
all it
mean,
is.
there were some parts of her story that were very interesting, especially when like she's caught and she's put into like that secret room underground and she meets all of these other characters. And it was just very interesting to see each and every single one of these characters because these are very, very different takes on what those characters actually are in the Six Within. Like you're introduced to characters like Arnim Zola, you're introduced to Nathaniel Essex. That is
Yeah.
Mr. Sinister for crying out loud. And he's this skinny, pasty faced looking kid. Like it was such a unique take on some of these characters. So if there was anything positive that I would take from Spider Woman's story, it would be all of these really bold directions that Brian Michael Bendis took to bring some of these characters into the Ultimate Universe, because clearly they haven't been there yet, and this is our first time seeing them, at least for my personal viewing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I was gonna say it had missed my notice, but yeah, those were first appearances of Ultimate Universe versions of these characters, and that's certainly neat, so that's worth it for sure.
Yeah, but the real meat of the story is it starts off with Spider Woman trying to get answers from the Roxxon Corporation. Now, the Roxxon Corporation is like a villainous corporation that the Marvel fans know well, but then we're taken to what's been going on with Reed Richards now being at home because based on Ultimate Fantastic Four Requiem, he has now moved back home because he doesn't really, and he's trying to put his life back together. And then in the heat of an argument that he and his father are having, where he's really not trying to take a part of it, he's literally lounging around on the couch, all of a sudden his home blows up. And I'm like, okay, what just happened here?
Yeah.
And then, of course, we remind ourselves that the Fantastic Four haven't really been the Fantastic Four in quite some time. And this is also the point where Ben returns and reunites with Sue and Johnny. And when Sue finds out about what happens to Reed, she just goes crazy because she's so upset, even though she's like put him down and seriously broke his heart already. But at the same time, a crazy thing also happens, which is something that is actually shown later on, which is definitely a bold move in the world of Ultimate. Ben confesses his love to Sue. That
Yeah.
is insane.
So that it was that is certainly an attention grabbing moment. And obviously it plays throughout the entirety of the book, but here at the beginning of it, for sure, he confesses that to her, has his whole little, oh, can't take that back now, it's out there. And we're kind of left with ambiguity at the beginning, of how it's received, what they're thinking in that moment, even though he chooses to leave right then and there. But I will say that was definitely a choice, and I think it makes we talked a lot in our reading of Fantastic Four, the first issues there in that episode about the riffs on familiar characters and what it means for us, but that one certainly catches the attention of people who are very familiar with the Fantastic Four.
Exactly. And then the other big event that takes place in this story is the fact that the next target of this weird explosion is a mysterious explosion at the Baxter building. But one of the few things that predominantly seems to be very close to all of these occurrences is this very strange, gigantic green creature who doesn't speak a lick of English. And of course, Shield has to get involved in this. And this is another very interesting take in the world of the Ultimate Universe. And that's the fact that Carol Danvers is not Captain Marvel in this world. Rather, she is the head of Shield. Of course, where is Nick Fury? We'll find out a little bit later. But yeah, we're definitely seeing some very interesting things taking place when these strange attacks are taking place. And
Mhm.
the thing I really like about Ultimate Enemy is the fact that you get a lot of these moments, you get a lot of this action, but you're really not getting anything spoon fed to you. And,
Mhm.
again, in a world that we're living in right now where every single Marvel comic just brings you up to speed and gives you a whole page of paragraphs to read, the fact that we just get a lot of see and don't tell is a real breath of fresh air, especially when you think about where Marvel Comics is really right now in the current world.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's very true. And I think you know, we have talked a little bit about some inconsistencies in more recent years from Brian Michael Bendis, but he's a titan. And this is some of his work at some of the peak of his creativity,
Absolutely.
where I think, everything everyone has to say about him that's so glowing, you can find in these pages for sure. Um, and you're exactly right about that. There's bravery in the choice to not give us everything immediately, to leave some lingering questions, to offer tidbits of things that people who are familiar with the 616 universe will say, that's intriguing. I wonder how that came to be. I wonder how similar this character is with those changes. It's it's really kind of the ultimate universe in a microcosm, right? Which is trading in the fact that some people know these characters and will get a whole lot out of those questions, and then just trusting the audience who are coming to it for a more modern take on the story to be along for the ride if you're not going to give people absolutely every fill-in. Here's what happened last time on Doomsday,
And the first chapter ends with no answers given, but a very interesting cliffhanger. And that is, again, what happens to Ben, which is another very interesting and bold statement to make in the world of comic books. Through the attacks and through the events that are currently happening, Ben goes through a crazy metamorphosis and he actually sheds all of the rock on the surface of his body, and he actually is human again, but he comes along with a very strange and extraordinary power. So I will definitely say that for me, that is one of the major highlights of this whole story, just because of the fact that Brian Michael Bendis goes in that direction. It's like
Mhm.
you're actually going to take the entire legacy of the Fantastic Four and you're literally turning it on its head. And we haven't even gotten to the biggest surprise of them all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, here we are. It is genuinely shocking because the nature of the character of Ben is as the Thing, he's no longer flesh and blood, and how he relates to the world, being completely unable to ever fit in any setting, being completely unable to act as a normal human, and taking that away from the character is really big. And it shows you a true we're not in Kansas anymore moment for where we're going with the characters. In these first issues of Ultimate Enemy, where we left off with the characters where they all went their separate ways, Johnny's dad passed away, and Reed went back to the house, all of that. And just we lost the Fantastic Four, and now we're breaking down what the Fantastic Four is further. So we are really in uncharted territory in these stories with these characters,
Exactly.
and it only gets weirder from here.
Oh yeah, because right now the big thing is Nick Fury has come out of the shadows and he's definitely assisting Carol in regards to the fact that they're going to capture this creature and they're going to try and find out what the heck his deal is and where he comes from. But then a whole bunch of other things start taking place. One of the other things is the fact that Peter is now terrified because he now knows that he is most likely a target as well, and he wants to make sure that Aunt May and his friends are safe. On the same token, we're also introduced to a very strange person working in a deep portion of the government. And that's also one of my other gripes with the book. I mean, I know Marvell. Like, he is the Kree spy, not
Hmm.
necessarily a spy, but basically the agent of the Kree that is on Earth to study the humans for his supreme leader. But oh my god, this version of Marvell is ultimate cringe. Like, I'm like, every single time he is in the pages of Ultimate Mystery, I'm just like, can you please stop showing me this character? What is this character's deal? I don't get it. And I don't like it.
Yeah, okay. I guess I can see that. Maybe I'm just used to it. Um, but yeah, I guess if we're gonna be honest, maybe cringy is a good way is a
I
good way
mean, the
to
other
describe
character
it.
that we're introduced to is a very unique take on Rick Jones. Do you
Yeah.
know who Rick Jones is, by the way?
No.
Oh, so Rick Jones is associated with the Hulk. He's just one of Bruce Banner's friends. He doesn't have powers.
So, well, yeah, and that's why I guess I don't remember. So I guess just completely whole cloth. This is a different version for the Ultimate Universe.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
very unique. He's sort of reminded me, even though he's not, he's
Yeah,
sort
I
of
didn't even
reminded
know
me.
that was a I didn't even know that was something being drawn from 616.
No, he sort of reminded me of one of the Heralds of Galactus, but he's clearly not one of the Heralds of Galactus. He's not really associated with any organization on Earth, nor is he re- connected to any alien group.
He's
He's
just
just
got
this
that cosmic
metahuman.
look,
Yeah,
right? He's so
he's
it
just a
just gives you
metahuman.
that. Yeah, exactly.
But at least this metahuman drives the story a little bit further, and at least he knows that his role is to help these heroes when it comes to these mysterious forces that are taking out all of these major sites and trying to kill these metahumans.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, Marvel, not really my thing.
Not your thing. That's fine. That's fine. I'm not gonna go to bat for Captain Marvel.
Yeah. And so, of course, they have this alien and they're trying to get answers out of him. And then they finally start finding ways to crack him. And he basically says, the end is coming. The end is coming. There is no hope for the human race. And of course, everyone is trying to get a crack at this guy because they really want to know why he's here, who sent him. And Sue, being the woman that she is, seems to really start putting things together and trying to figure out why these specific things, like, they haven't gone after any world leaders, they haven't tried to topple any governments. They're only taking out these specific sites and keep coming back to these specific places. And Sue basically is saying there's a connection between all of this. They came after the Baxter building. Why are they going after Spider Man's house? Because of the fact that he's friends with Johnny. And so Sue starts putting things all together. And then when we get to the end of Ultimate Mystery, that is where we get the biggest reveal that we've ever seen. And my God,
Yeah.
what this specific moment started is what leads to Secret Wars, what is currently going on in the Ultimate Universe that has just been redone by Jonathan Hickman right now in comics. And she puts everything together. Reed Richards is working with these aliens, these pocket. We find out that they're not really even from this world. They're interdimensional travelers, and he is helping them conquer this world for him in a certain capacity.
It is it is a shit a brick moment. And just the idea, the I mean, look, we read Fantastic Four, the Ultimate Universe version on this channel. Great take on the character. You really
Yeah.
feel for Reed Richards the way he began. And you know what? On reflection, when you see this story and you see what his origins were like, it does almost kind of feel like a villain origin story, doesn't it?
Well, you think
You
about
know?
it this way, this guy has been shit on his entire life, even when people know just how brilliant of a mind he is, he still is not given that proverbial pat on the back. He's not given that appreciation
Mhm.
that he truly deserves. And I'm going to say this, even this version of Reed, of course he deserves appreciation, but you think of everything that's happened, the fact that he got bullied in school, the fact that his family just couldn't seem to understand him, the fact that he was sort of the one who believed that he took the blame for everything that happened that turned them into Fantastic Four, the fact that he had been constantly trying to find a way to bring Ben back to the way he was, and yet he, even though he couldn't do it, Ben still, again, maybe this is because of the fact that I haven't read all of the Ultimate Fantastic Four, but I really have no idea if Ben like just constantly said, "How come you haven't figured this out yet? What's wrong with you?" You know, like did he encourage him or did he yell at him, etc., etc. And then we take a look, and the final nail in the coffin was when Sue just simply said, "I'm not going to marry you because you didn't give a crap about my family during my deepest and darkest times." So you know what he said? He said, "Fuck it and fuck it all."
Yeah. And really that's the thing. You're right. When you go over it beat by beat, not just the very beginning, but this plot line, like when you recontextualize it, seeing what happens in Ultimate Mystery, it really does seem like a villain origin story. But it goes to show you, and here's where I think Brian Michael Bendis is so good in this. I think that he showed a really nuanced version of that thin line between hero and villainy that a lot of times in comics or any form of media that aren't written with a lot of care and attention, the kind of fallen hero can just feel cheesy, can just feel like this person wanted to write a story where they are the villain to be able to do it and they didn't care much about motivation or like, one bad day, but like actually, right? But I really love about how we did this reveal is that it just recontextualizes everything we know and had thought of as hero moments or down on his luck, and it just suddenly hits you as like that was a villain story
Right?
that
But
I
I
had been
think,
reading and I didn't
but I,
notice.
yeah, but what I think was the most powerful part was when when Sue officially confronts him and he goes, "Took you this long to figure it out, huh?" Like
Hmm.
he said, "Oh, he said you probably knew this ages ago. Why didn't you try to stop me then?" Like he said you're supposed to be smarter than me, right? Like he
Hmm.
said to her, "You're supposed to be the smarter one, right?"
Hmm.
And so, and she doesn't even know what to do. She knows that there's no way of reaching him at this point. So we have officially, and here's the thing: we're finally going to mention this name, but this is officially the origin story of the infamous Maker. And that is a name that a lot of people know in comics right now. He's going to be a major force for the rest of this journey. And the fact that this is the moment where we officially see his transformation. What's going to happen after that? Well, we're obviously going to let you guys know when we get into Ultimate Doom. Ultimate Doom is pretty much the final act. It is all the heroes up against Reed because basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but he basically wants to suck the entire Earth into the negative zone and
Yep.
destroy it.
Yep. Yep. Essentially, and it creates kind of a black hole effect that feeling. But yeah, that's the plan.
And
And it's
yeah,
truly kind of that completely gone off the deep end. This is truly villainous Reed Richards. We are the maker now, and this is going to have an impact on a whole lot of our journey moving forward.
Yeah,
Probably one
because
of the
this
biggest
is
parts.
because you see, again, it's such a complex story, but at the same time, what I love so much about it is it's a modern take on classic supervillainy.
Hmm.
That's what I
Hmm.
love. I love the classic supervillainy. The standing over the beaten hero and starting your monologue and telling everybody what you've done and that you're just going to take over the world or you're going to destroy the world. Like, this really is such a great modern version of that classic thing that I love so much. And that's the thing. I love, even today, it's like, I think that's one of the main reasons why I like the Lex Luthor of the Zack Snyder film world, and I like the Maxwell Lord of Wonder Woman 1984, because I just love the fact that in these modern dark superhero movies, these writers and these people who put these characters together, they want to give you some true classic supervillainy. And I
Yeah.
love it when they do that. I love the classic supervillain. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and to take it into this story, not to be a broken record, but there's so much to commend Brian Michael Bendis for with this story. Talking about the characterization of Reed and making him into the maker here, like I think that that version of like classical villainy makes beautiful sense in this version of Reed Richards because of that thin line between hero and villain, which is that sort of over the top, lorded over, monologue like true villain's villain. You only get to from having an origin like this version of Reed had, of being beaten down and not cared about by the people who are supposed to care for you. The I'm gonna make you listen now kind of villain monologue thing, right? So it all flows really, really well. And it's just yet another time that I'll just be heaping praise upon the writing of this story,
Yeah.
but not just this book, but the Ultimate Universe as a whole.
And you also get some of the best visuals of this entire story, especially the part where Johnny burns Reed's face. That is definitely the image that sticks with you. And basically,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, what do we get? The heroes are victorious. They push Reed into the negative zone and they seal it up. And then the world is safe for now. But, at what cost? Because these characters are forever changed. This world is now truly, I mean, I truthfully feel that even though Ultimatum, and again, we didn't review Ultimatum in depth, but when the world is turned, when the world's axes are shifted and it causes catastrophic events to take place all over the world, that's ginormous. That is as epic as it can be. But the truth of the matter is that event doesn't hold a candle to the results that we get in the Doomsday trilogy. I think that what we get here is 10 times deeper. There's so much more at stake at the end, even when the heroes do come out victorious.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it is, as I alluded to at the beginning, one of those kind of transitory stories that kind of is an event onto itself, but falls between, big, absolutely everybody in the universe gets involved, sort of stakes and difficulty. This is at both times universally important, intensely personal, and something that is in service of building to the next stories that we will read more than pretty much anything else.
Yeah, and we got 2 chapters of this story arc to go after this, and it still is these creators who are part of this ultimate universe that will continue to push the boundaries of the lore of Marvel Comics. The last 2 stories in the Ultimate Universe that we're going to be talking about here on the Ultimate Journey are also game changers, but also very, very crucial to what is ahead for Secret Wars itself. So we're going to leave this. I'm definitely going to say that The second time around, there was a lot more positive that I took from this, even though I did have my nitpicks, which I did specifically talk about here. But they definitely didn't take away from the story as a whole. This really was a much better read than I remembered the first time around. And I'm pretty certain again, this was your first time reading these.
Yeah, this was my first time reading this story. I was very familiar with what occurs in this story, but it was really interesting to actually read the book itself. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this one. This is some of my favorite stuff we have read on the Ultimate side, now that we're taking our step to the right part of the arc.
Yeah, exactly. So, in the meantime, everybody, thank you very much for watching. And we're looking forward to the next Ultimate Journey episode. Obviously, we're going to go back to the DC world. And I'm just going to say that if you thought that this chapter of the Road to Secret Wars was intense, let me just tell you one thing. You have no idea what's coming on the Road to Blackest Night. Things are going to get very intense over there. But please feel free to leave a comment. Let us know if you've read these. Let us know what your thoughts. Was there anything that we might have missed? And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content. And we'll see you in the next one.